Thank you all for joining us today. I am John Poitevent. As Joe said, I'm the director of Parish Catalyst, part of Renew International, and we're so grateful to have you join us. I'm so excited for this conversation. And I just want you once again to remember and realize this is just a gathering of the church around the world right now. We've had over 300 of you register from 38 different states. Other countries include Australia, Canada, Cameroon, England, South Africa, and Ireland. I think Julianne's whole family is registered watching this. And then we have some diocesan and archdiocesan leaders joining us from Hartford, Kansas City, Newark, San Antonio, Austin, Cleveland, Oakland, Spokane, and Yakima. And Yakima, you need to send me some apples. You're right in the middle of the apple harvest there in Yakima. So I hope you guys are having a good season getting ready for Advent and Christmas. So this conversation with Tim Glemkowski and Julianne Stanz is something I recorded earlier this week just because their schedules wouldn't permit for them to be here today. But Tim is the CEO of the National Eucharistic Revival, but he was also a founding partner in Revive Parishes, a really robust video training curriculum that is free. You might check out. It's free training for parish leaders. Julianne is the director of evangelization for the Diocese of Green Bay. She's also a prolific author, speaker, and just a great voice in this world of accompaniment and discipleship. So you're going to hear from both of them. They're going to share from their heart why they're a part of this, what it means, and how you can be involved. So without any more, let's just go to my conversation with them. Feel free to post your questions in the Q&A, as Joe mentioned, and keep an eye on your chat window. He'll be posting links to anything that they mention that could be useful to you. So let's go now to that conversation. Well, Tim and Julianne, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm a big fan of both of you, not just what you do, but who you are as people, and so honored you join us for this today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having us, John. So excited to be here with Tim.
Yeah, such a joy, such a delight. So honored. Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to jump right into the questions. And, you know, anyone who's followed Parish Catalyst at all knows that we love to rip off Simon Sinek profusely. And so we always start with why. So why a National Eucharistic Revival and why now? And I'll let just whoever wants to start pick it up from there.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think kind of the most critical one. This is in some ways the largest evangelization project of the U.S. bishops ever, collectively in college. And so I think it's worth asking, like why would they go to all these lengths and this effort and energy? I think for me, it really fits within the broader mission right now of the church, which is the missionary conversion of all of our institutions and ways of doing things so that we can become more adept again at presenting Jesus Christ as the answer to every question and longing of the human heart. And I do think that clearly some of the studies that showed a critically low percentage of Catholics believing in the Eucharist sort of prompted it. But to me, it's more about the bishops together sort of saying in the midst of a time in which, the world is clearly hurting and there's all kinds of turmoil and division and scandal and all these different things going on, how do we actually, what do we put in front of all of us as a church to say, here's where our hope lies and how God is going to bring about renewal? And it really comes back to that encounter with Jesus in the Eucharist and inviting people back to that first love, that initial encounter. Pope Francis has talked about that a lot, right? To come back again and again and again to that initial encounter. And then to not just have that encounter, keep us in that place, but to have it impel us forward on mission filled with the charity, love of God and love of neighbor that sends us into the world. So 3 years kind of focused on those two things, encounter and mission, in my mind is sort of why this is happening. God wants to renew his church. And I think the bishops are prophetically inviting the church to say he wants to do it through the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so true in so many respects. I think also God's people have told their priests, their bishops, and parish staffs just how important Eucharistic devotion reverence is. And then to take that, like Tim says, and out onto the streets. I use the image with my children of being a tabernacle with feet, that when you receive the body of Jesus into your body, then you take him out onto the street. And I think if you look at the revival in the context of the larger picture of the last couple of years related to the pandemic and, what should we do as a church? Where should we go? I think about the words, of Peter, where else would he go, Lord, but to you? And so that deeply personal encounter that's at the heart of the Eucharist and at the heart of the life of the church, that's what's driving this movement. And I think it would be a very cynical reductionist kind of point of view to say this is a ploy to get, our pews filled. But I think that is beautiful. First of all, we want our churches to be overflowing, but we want people there who are coming with all of the weight of the world, their burdens, their cares, and to place those at the foot of our Lord, receive him in the Eucharist, and then go out to tell people about that. That personal witness is at the heart of the movement. And I think this is a really interesting place for institutional conversion and personal conversion to take place for us as a church right now. That to me is at the core of why we are where we are as a church today.
Before we came on, we were talking about how when you say something, one group of people hears it one way and another group of people hears it another way, right? And everybody's got their baggage they bring into all of this. And I just wonder if you could speak to, when we talk about this, I'm sure some people hear this is all about doctrine. People need to learn the right doctrine and agree to the right doctrine, and that's what we need, doctrinal reformation. And then other people hear it and think about the beauty of the encounter and personal encounter, personal experience. Where do you see this, what you're doing and the most important part of it being in light of all of that conversation?
Oh, what a great question.
Yeah, that's a really deep question.
Julianne, please.
No, go ahead, Tim. I totally interrupted you.
I guess I was going to say first, I do worry about a church that can't help but receive everything through the prism of a political horse race through different ideologies and camps. If we can't as a church just say, sort of that from God comes our hope, and we can't say it together. And if we can only receive that through, candidly, right? This isn't to criticize anyone. I'm the worst sinner of us all, but if we see everything through the prism of cynicism, that does want to just couch things as, am I on this team or am I not? Am I on the Eucharistic Revival side or am I not? Then I just man, what are we doing? We've lost the plot, I think, a little bit. I had this one of the mentor kind of figures in my life was my grandpa's best friend was a Trappist monk, Father Dan Lenahan in New Mallory Abbey in Peosta, Iowa. And I remember he would talk sometimes about, he was an old, actually the original sort of CIA before it was the CIA, I forget what it was called, but World War II, sort of a secret agent, and then came back and decided to commit his life to prayer and work. And he used to say sometimes to people when he would talk about kind of the political divisions in the church, well, what outfit are we working for here anyway? That was kind of his way of viewing it. And it's just, in some ways, the division is understandable given, how divisive Jesus was, right? And that he was sort of probably viewed as too conservative by some and too liberal by others, But to me, the most important part is that, I think certainly all the things we'll talk about are critical, but it's kind of what you said, which is in my own life, have I encountered the reality of a God who loves me and who gave himself in the Eucharist forever for me in such a way that it has compelled me to make a gift of my life in relationship back to him, but not just to him, but to the world. Like Mother Teresa says, to actually be broken for the life of the world, the way he has broken himself for the life of the world. And so to kind of become the Eucharist, or a Eucharistic missionary, as we say in that sense. And to find that within my own life has been, for me, the primary task of the Eucharistic Revival. I
love that, Tim. What struck me too is that the revival being at the center and the heart of the church. And I remember the story of, I work in a diocesan office, and sometimes priests will call about various things. And one of our staff here was just very perplexed by two priests that she held in such high esteem, kind of arguing back and forth about something. And she came to me about it, and I just remember telling her to go and sit and gaze upon the face of our Lord in the chapel and come back. And what we ended up talking about after is a great example of what you just shared, which is, Jesus was broken open, right on the cross for each one of us. And his heart is right at the center, right? And so we want to bring people to the heart right at the center. And somebody said to me, it's sometimes it feels like the church is falling apart. And that is not a Eucharistic metaphor. The Eucharist doesn't fall apart for us on the altar. It's broken open. And I think that's what our call to be as a church right now, is to be broken open, with greater, yes, love, devotion, reverence for our Lord, but also then broken open to share the fruit of that with others, those who are feeling broken in their lives and no one to listen to, nowhere to go, but to bring people right into the center of the church's mission. And the heart of that, the heart of Jesus' very person, is in the Eucharist. And so to me, that's the driving heartbeat of the revival. And I think that's where we see a lot of like co-opting of messages taking place. But, you know, from someone who was there in the room where it happened, when some of these conversations were taking place right out of COVID about, you know, the initial data coming in on the real presence, and, you know, different avenues of the ways that the bishops could go with various messages. And I remember when it became very clear very quickly that this was what God wanted, that this moment is where we are as a church, because the Holy Spirit has ordained it to be so. And so to me, that's such an important message to get out there, which is to bring people into the heart of the person of Jesus at this time, when it feels like there's so much division about different aspects of how to be church today.
That is great. I hope people hear that loud and clear above everything else. You know, I think the greatest message I've ever heard about living out the Eucharist was actually a Protestant African-American pastor named Bishop T.D. Jakes. And he talked about how God, with each of us, he takes us, he blesses us, he breaks us, and he gives us away for the sake of the world. And if that's the message that people can receive and understand and live out, what an incredible work this will be. I want to share the vision statement from your website, and then have each of you speak to it. It says the vision is to inspire a movement of Catholics across the United States who are healed, converted, formed, and unified by an encounter with Jesus in the Eucharist, and who are then sent out on mission for the life of the world. Those 4 words really stood out to me: healed, converted, formed, and unified. And I would just love to hear each of you speak to that personally.
You know, I was thinking about this. I was speaking with a group of women. First of all, there's a methodology there, right? So this was very much a very robust conversation with the team that was putting some of the big pieces in place for the revival. You know, the first thing that Jesus did was he healed people. And because of that healing, then they decided to follow him, and they were formed in that following. And then their hearts were converted, right? Because they came to the source of that encounter. So healing, forming, converting, and then being sent out for mission is Jesus's methodology. And I think it's important that we as a church be able to recognize in our own lives how Jesus does that for us. And I was thinking actually of my son, and I had gone through a health scare a couple of years ago, and it was pretty significant. And I thought I was hiding it from my children, and I went to tuck into bed my youngest son, and he was about 3 at the time, and knowing that I had this procedure coming up, and really was very stressed about that. And as I was leaving, he said, "Mom, can I ask you a question?" And you know, like the 10 minutes before you get your children in bed, all havoc can break loose. Like that is when night is going to go well, or when you're going to have, you know, a peaceful night. And I said, "Sure." And he called me over, and I sat on his bed, and he said to me, "Mom, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, Mom is just going through a little bit of a tough time." And he said, he's put his little 3-year-old hand out, and he just patted me on the back, and then said, "It's going to be okay, Mom." And then he said, "Is it true what Father says?" Like a very direct question. And I said, "Is it true? What does Father say?" And he held his 2 little hands up like this to me. And I've told this story a few times because to me, it's just so perfect for what our children see. He said, "Is it true when Father does this and says, 'This is my body broken for you. This is my body given for you'? Is it true, Mom? Will we live forever if we do this?" And I found myself, you know, sitting with all this worry in my life. And looking at him and saying, yes, we will have eternal life, son. It's the Eucharist that connects us together through all eternity, and leaving his room with a deeper, deeper sense of peace than I've ever had. And I think about those moments in our lives where we have deeper conversion moments to the Eucharist through the stories of other people. Like that story you shared, Tim, of your mentor. I mean, I can imagine so many priests sitting in that place of spiritual fatherhood and needing to hear that message. I think we're too quiet as a church today about some of the most life transforming moments that happen in these kinds of conversations. And I think that's what the revival is going to do. It's going to bring to light. It already is. It's bringing to light stories all over the place.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I think we had similar journeys with this project, Julianne, where I think we were sort of invited, because of our involvement with the USCCB Committee on Evangelization and Catechesis to participate in some of the initial, and then I think over time almost came to realize like, oh no, this is God's really doing something here, like deep in the church. And, maybe some of that's going to be hidden. Maybe some of it will by the end of this. We're only a year and, less than a year and a half in. And, so there's a long way to go in terms of what God might accomplish for it. But I think that was one of the conversations. I remember that it was on Zoom with a bunch of leaders talking about. And that was one of those times where I started to recognize like, oh, this is more than just this many % of Catholics believe this doctrine. So now we need to make it, 5% more or something, like just a kind of a catechetical initiative or a teaching initiative. But it was actually about this, something God was going to do to kind of bring about a greater, so that's certainly that institutional project of broadly across the church, healing, forming, converting, unifying. But again, like I think that the most important piece of actually the vision statement is the movement piece. Like that only happens if I respond and you respond and father responds and sister responds. And like in the church, things don't get done by just like power and checklists, like every parish needs to do these 4 things to bring about Eucharistic revival. It happens when saints and less holy people to choose to respond generously from their own life and in their own circle of influence and leadership, whatever that is. So I think in my life, I was very convicted about that first, like almost everything. We've been building all these things in the background. Like we have this invite one back campaign coming out soon. So I went and invited one person back to the Eucharist, like, because I feel like I need to live everything we're asking everybody to do. Yeah. And so for me, the healing component has actually been the most important as I've sought deeper healing in my life through Jesus and the Eucharist, kind of from a personal standpoint.
I love what you said at the end there about us practicing it, because I just want parish staffs to hear that. Like if you're not pursuing personal revival, you are not going to see it manifest in your parish. If you're not practicing it in private, you're not going to see it happen in public. And so I just really encourage you to hear that and embrace this on an individual personal level before anything else. That's where we start.
Yeah, you know what, John, before you move to your question, a funny little quote to back that up is my bishop, Bishop David Ricken. He always says the first mission field is right here. Because that's the first place you hear it is in your ears, and it's to translate that mission field from your head to your heart. And I think that's what we want to do, because this healing is tough work, right? And it's getting into the nit and grit of people's lives. And I think sometimes we think the Eucharist is this real neat, cut and dry piece. And I think real Eucharistic revival, which is what we're going for, is about getting into the real messes of people's lives and allowing the bountiful and abundant mercy of God to get into the broken places of people's lives and let him do the work. Because I think we think it's all on us, and it isn't. He wants this revival more than we do.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, I want to jump back to the why, but on a more personal level. Both of you, if anyone's paying attention, you're both busy people. You've been doing a lot of amazing work over the last few years. And so for you to say yes to something, it means it has to be really important to you. And so I'd love to hear from each of you. Why did each of you get involved in working with the National Eucharistic Revival?
Over to you, Tim.
Okay. This is kind of the first answer that popped to mind when you said this is, and this is probably not the right answer, the best answer, but for me it was actually Bishop Cousins. I think that's like the token of a great leader is. So Bishop Barron inaugurated this vision when he was the head of the Committee on Evangelization Catechesis in 2019. He started getting the bishops rallied around it. And then Bishop Cousins, who was an auxiliary at the time in St. Paul, Minneapolis, sort of picked up the vision, has been asked to build it. Now he's the ordinary in Crookston. But I find him to be such a credible leader, candidly, like just like a modern day apostle. Like you sort of see him, you're like, yeah, that's what that's supposed to look like, to sort of lead as a bishop. And so getting to know him over the years, candidly, like I was invited to be part of this evangelization catechesis as one of the lay consultants, and watched his leadership, and it convicted me of sort of the way he prayed and heard our Lord speak, and that I wanted to help him execute on a vision that he was hearing in his heart. So I'd say candidly, there was a lot of it, and which is, I think, the token of great leaders, is people kind of want to run with them.
Yeah. So this is a great conversation, because Tim and I had some overlap. I have been a longstanding member of the Evangelization Catechesis Committee, and after Bishop Barron, and I had heard the bishops discussing this with him and the excitement, but I had decided actually to step off the Evangelization and Catechesis Committee, because I was going to focus on my kids more, and all the things, and I'd been on it long enough. It's time to get some fresh faces in and everything. And Bishop Cousins had a conversation with me, and I heard the same thing that Tim just spoke of, which is this fire, this passion, this drive for missionary change, to project a vision that was big and universal and had room for everybody, right? No matter where you stood in the life of the church. And so I came back onto the committee as a result of his invitation. But as I was reflecting about it later, I just thought to myself, what else would I do? Where else would I go, Lord, if it's not to you? This is the reason why so many of our priests, so many of our bishops, so many of our lay people, our lay faithful Catholics stay in the church. It's the Eucharist. And so, okay, if we've got one shot to do this well, this is the team I want to do it with. And so there was great synergy around this. And I remember my excitement for Tim when he assumed the executive director role. I was like, yeah, this is an amazing team, and then started to see some of the voices emerge from all different parts of the life of the church, urban, rural, different backgrounds, different ways of being church. And I thought, if it's bringing all of us together, there's something really, really good about this. And so, Bishop Cousins is probably the thread that bound some of this together. But it's because the Lord placed this on his heart and placed it on the heart of the bishops. And you can hear that when they speak about it.
And Julianne, you said you were in the room as they began to dream about this thing. Give us a little bit of that experience. Like, take us into that room. Tell us what it's like. We're going to pause right there for a minute. That's your cliffhanger while I make a few announcements. But Julianne is going to tell us what it's like to be in that room with the bishops and what that experience is like. But before we do, I want to just let you know about a couple things. If you are in the Newark area, I want to be sure you know about our Newark Regional Parish Innovation Workshop. It's going to be November 29th. That's a Wednesday. And in that workshop, we're going to be introducing you to our process. We're going to be helping you and your team identify challenges that you're currently facing. Look at dreaming about some possibilities, exploring new ideas, best practices, and then creating some action steps on that. It's totally free. Lunch is provided. November 29th, Wednesday at Little Flower in Berkeley Heights. There's a link in your chat window. There'll be another link in the email that comes to you. If you're interested in bringing this kind of workshop to your town, let us know. We'd love to do it. But it's going to be a day for you to just come and work with your team on addressing some things that you may need to take some time and be guided through finding a breakthrough in. And then also, Laura is going to talk to you in just a second here about Eucharist Matters, which is our Eucharistic formation resource that we have for the whole family. Laura is our director of marketing, social media, all of that good stuff. Welcome, and let everybody know about Eucharist Matters.
Thank you, John, for such a flattering introduction. I love it. So Renew, in partnership with Catholic Home, actually just released a new program a few months ago that we call Eucharist Matters. It's aimed at the families of children receiving First Holy Communion. And the goal of Eucharist Matters is to guide families on their journey so that they can accompany their children and also to help enhance their understanding of this sacrament. Eucharist Matters is a completely online program that can be completed at the pace and convenience of each individual. It's perfect for parents, families, godparents, and we even know people who are using it for adult faith formation programs, things like OCIA and RCIA. There are 7 modules, and each of them feature certain elements like prayer, highlighted themes, and an instructional video, which is also very entertaining. They're little cartoon families that move through similar scenarios that we see in everyday life. And there's a free demo online for anybody who wants to try out a session, and a subscription option for parishes so that they can monitor participant progress from a convenient dashboard. And for individuals, and this is the last note about it, the single license to Eucharist Matters also includes a 1-year subscription to the Catholic Home platform, which will provide them with all of the resources they need to foster the spiritual growth of their families as part of a continuing journey. So once they finish the Eucharist Matters program, they'll still have support and resources to guide them the rest of the way. That's all I got, John. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. And that sounds like a great resource for families who are wondering, how can I take this Eucharistic revival and bring it into my home? And that'd be a great resource for that. All right. Well, we're going to continue on our conversation now. We're going to hear from Julianne about being in that room with all the bishops and how this all started and what that experience is like. Let's go there now. And Julianne, you said you were in the room as they began to dream about this thing. Give us a little bit of that experience. Like, take us into that room. Tell us what it's like.
Yeah, and Tim has been there too, but it's kind of an intense environment. When you're in an environment with, 200 bishops, or maybe just in a room with 30, which is actually harder because the quality of the conversation is much more intense. But, there's a lot of documentation and plans and strategic things that are constantly coming in. And, I remember, and I won't say his name, but a bishop who's since been very involved with the revival, he said, he leaned over and he said, we've been talking about strategic plans and pastoral priorities and all this and that. Maybe we should try Jesus. Maybe we should try Jesus, the Eucharist, unifying us. Like, it was said just off the cuff, but it kind of, it was such a human moment. Like, he was kind of joking about some of this, but he's like, brother bishops, this is the opportunity for us to really focus on our personal encounter. And then I remember that coincided with a period of fasting, actually, that the bishops were doing collectively. And the bishops were sitting in the room, and the lunch ladies were coming actually to take orders for lunch. And they said, no, this is where revival starts now. And so I think it started in prayer, but fasting was very much at the core early on of this initiative. And so we got to see some of these conversations really early on. And the messages have been consistent. And I think, Tim, you'd probably agree with this. The committee have been very strong on those messages of healing, forming, converting. And it's a movement. This isn't a program. This isn't a process. This is a movement of Catholics from all walks of life coming together. And that message, I think, is very much at the heart of the revival, even as the messaging has continued to unfold.
Let's talk the nuts and bolts of that movement. We've talked a lot about why, talked about your own vision and heart for this, but let's talk about how it's happening, because I do hear from a lot of leaders, like, I don't really know what to do. I don't know how to be involved. And I know you've made it clear on your site, but probably not everybody's been there. There's a timeline of 3 years. We're already in year 2. Take us through that, the diocesan year, the parish year, the mission year, and break those down for us.
Yeah, I think, so kind of in broadest strokes, sort of the what of it is, it's a 3-year initiative modeled on the Quinto Encuentro, which is a kind of movement in Hispanic evangelization of leaders, kind of similarly. And so what distinguishes each year is the audience, right? So the first year is about leaders in the church and sort of personal renewal and casting vision and just connecting with them. The second year, the parish year, is about Catholics in the pews, some of whom have a relationship with Jesus Eucharist, some of whom don't, and really helping them to just kind of rekindle that relationship, right? And then the last year is the year of mission, meaning those who, for whatever reason, are far from Jesus and the Eucharist. Either they've fallen away or they're de-churched, unchurched, whatever. Like, how do we go out to them Eucharistically, which I think is important to say, like, not every Eucharistic mission in that sense necessarily means just proclaiming the doctrine. It could be about what's the next step for someone to help bring them closer to that heart of the faith. And in that regard, I think it's kind of simple. Like you said, the Leader's Playbook on the website is the best place to start. There's these 4 pillars. The key to it being a program or not a program, but a movement. We still wanted to give pillars to sort of help people think their way through the process a little bit, to say God is inviting in some way renewal in this parish, in renewal in the Eucharistic life of people in this parish. So how do we bring that about? What might God be inviting us to do as leaders under, in terms of reinvigorating worship, both the beauty of and how it's celebrated, and sort of the interior disposition of those who come to the celebration. Personal encounter, how do we provide opportunities for people to come face to face with Jesus and meet him personally? Robust faith formation, how might we be being invited to show people that the teaching of the church on the doctrine of the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist is not dry, but it's credible and biblical, and something the church has always taught. And then missionary sending, how does all of this help us to mobilize people for the mission, for the life of the world? So that's kind of the structure. I think for me, where I think I've even found, and this is again, but I do think people do struggle sometimes to understand how to implement things that have a big vision like this, partly because we overcomplicate it. Like, we're trying to sort of do the perfect thing instead of really just getting with our leadership team and saying, who do we have and what do we have? Who are we going to and how are we going to reach them? Like, it's, and just kind of like talking about that, praying about that, and discerning that and then doing something, right? You don't do everything or do the perfect thing, but do something to reach those folks.
I think too, I think we have so much infrastructure in the church that we can leverage, both institutionally and person to person. And I think no matter what size parish you are, or an apostolate or school, there's always, like Tim says, something that you can do to connect with people. And so whether it's doing a small faith sharing group that's very focused on this, or praying as a staff together and spending time with the Lord in adoration, and looking at our own call to holiness, and looking at all the practices and the ways that the church helps us to grow. There's something for everyone here. And I feel like that message maybe hasn't been as attended to, that there's something for everyone, young, old, everyone in between. And that one of the questions that we've been asking a lot too on the Eucharistic Revival team is, who's not here? Who's missing? Who are you missing? Whether it's a child or a grandchild or a friend that used to come and maybe hasn't come in many years, or has never come at all. Like, this is about reaching people, one person at a time. And I think that question of getting to the margins and getting to the peripheries, the team has taken that question really seriously as well. There's been a lot of dialogue about what does this look like in more marginalized rural areas, or maybe in urban areas where the demographics look a little different. Eucharistic Revival is for everyone. We wanted to get that message out.
Yeah, if I could speak to this a little bit, just based on some of what I see and some of the ways that we encourage parishes to think about movements and things like this. One is something I just, what I most often hear pastors say is, well, we're just going to offer more Eucharistic adoration. And, it's one thing you can do, but a movement is not started by offering one thing and hoping people show up for it. And it's one thing that's going to work for people who want to go to Eucharistic adoration. It's not going to reach people outside of that group. So I encourage you to think of your parishes as what we call the core, the committed, the congregation, and the crowd. Think of those 4 groups of people. The core, they're going to say yes to anything you ask them to do. Right? The committed that they're committed to your parish, but they may not be regularly encountering something like this. They've maybe never even been to Eucharistic adoration. And then the congregation, those people that are sometimes what we call pew potatoes.
Church adjacent. Yeah.
Yes. They're there. We're not always sure why they're there, but they're there and they're hearing us. But what's a baby step for them to engage in this more? Mm-hmm. And then the crowd, those folks, maybe they're the Christmas, Easter, Ash Wednesday. How can we help engage with and just get with your team and kind of create little profiles for each of those people and dream about what would reach them, or maybe reach out to someone that's in that group and ask them, how could we better reach you or better serve you?
Mhm.
Tim, if you could talk about the Congress, we talked about this a little bit earlier, this year of mission launching with this Congress. And I love this quote from you, a movement needs a moment. I think that is so true. Think about any great movement in the history of the world. There's a moment that just catalyzes it and ignites it. And so tell us about that.
Yeah, I think it's part of the idea that the 3 years of Eucharistic revival is sort of the beginning of this, not the end. Like so yeah, at the end of year 2, the parish year, so in between year 2 and 3, sort of the beginning of the year of mission is the 10th National Eucharistic Congress. So we used to have these gatherings historically of hundreds of thousands of Catholics, Chicago and Cincinnati, New Orleans, all over the country in the early 1900s. And we haven't done one since 1941. So it sort of became part of the team's vision to resurrect these gatherings as part of this Eucharistic revival. We've had 9 national Eucharistic congresses. There's been international ones going every 4 years for, forever. Let's have the 10th one in 2024 in Indianapolis for 5 days. And that's exactly it. We see it as something we're going to be sort of praying and fasting for, really inviting people to show up who want to be Eucharistic missionaries, not just like, so we don't see this, to be clear, as like, hey, if you don't believe in the Eucharist, come to this event and we'll, hopefully you'll believe by the time you're gone, right? This isn't like a Catholic car wash. It's a moment for committed Catholics, or even the core, to come and seek revival together, to pray and seek for a new outpouring of the Holy Spirit on the church in the United States, and to create momentum toward continual movement in the church. And so even part of that kind of, intercessory or preparation work is these 4 national Eucharistic pilgrimages that are going to go across the United States for 2 months, including through Green Bay, and kind of be a part of the people of God across the United States, sort of preparing for this moment. So it's going to be incredible. 5 days, starts Wednesday night, the 17th, July 17th, 2024, ends on Sunday morning with a new missionary sending of the Church in the United States. And I just keep telling people, like, don't miss it. Like, you're going to wish you had been there after when you see it. People are sometimes like, what's a Congress? And we're trying to find more language to articulate what it's going to be like in terms of, morning impact sessions for encounter with Jesus, and afternoon equipping. And then every evening is going to be an experience of revival in the stadium, Lucas Oil Stadium, altogether for everyone who's there. But either way, it's like, even if we can't show you because we haven't had one in a long time what it looks like, don't miss it.
I'm super excited. I've had so many friends throughout the world. And this is important for me. I'm Irish, obviously, but so many people in Ireland have said, we want this for you guys, because if you're showing us how it can be done to bring new life to dry bones, we can do this too. So I think, there's something about the universality of something like this. There's been movements all across the world that have been centered on the Eucharist or centered on the Blessed Mother. And she will be present with us, right? Because some of those sessions are going to talk about, Mary, Mother of the Eucharist. But I feel like this is a moment too of solidarity as Catholics too. And I one thing that I love that the Congress made a decision on, and I don't know who was in the room when this happened, but it was to provide a kids track, to provide a family track, because I look at so many events that I go to, and I want my children to experience this, and we can never do it together as a family. There's always mom's here, dad's here. We're always right. This is an opportunity to bring together the family. And, that's the first place Jesus came, was in the family, right? And so I think that I just want to say kudos to the planning team on recognizing that moms and dads want this revival in their own family, and to provide a track for that, because you don't see that too often. And I think that's where I think there's going to be some incredible fruit that comes from families traveling together, whether they're carpooling or going on the bus with other families. But to have that right to, what are we going to? I don't know, but it's going to be amazing. And then to be there and see the magnitude and the vastness, and yet to be focused on the Eucharist. Don't miss it, like Tim said.
Yeah, I mean, to that effect, there's going to be even more. What I would encourage people to do is, if you're interested now, sign up for the email list, because there's going to be more information forthcoming about sort of accessibility and affordability options, particularly for families. More than that, I can't say. it's all embargoed. But you know, like in a few weeks, more information will be coming out about that. And to that end, yeah, there's a kids track, there's a youth track for high school youth groups.
Yep.
There's going to be events for young adults and different things. There's everything's gonna be multicultural, multilingual. Like this will be a gathering of the whole church. The thing we kind of are trying to say with our planning as we talk about it is, someone said this recently, I thought this was brilliant. There's a big difference between you're welcome here and we built this for you. And we're trying to build this for the whole church, like really intentionally. And so again, more information on all of that, but that's our hearts as we're doing this.
Family Vacay 2024, Indianapolis,
Skip
Indiana.
Disneyland. Yeah.
It is going to be the happiest and holiest place on earth. How about that?
That's the new tagline.
Actually, the new tagline. Well, as we wrap up here, any immediately upcoming events or dates that we should be aware of? We're going to include all the things you referenced, the playbook, all the links on your site will be in the email going out with this and in the show notes. But any immediately upcoming dates we need to be thinking about?
Applications for perpetual pilgrims for the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage are open right now. Congress registration, like I said, look for more updates in the next couple of weeks, is probably important to look at. And then, a lot of it is in May, we start walking for 2 months toward Indianapolis in May 2024. So as far as big milestones, those are the next ones kind of upcoming.
Yeah, I would say too, check out the website. There, that there's a piece on the website specifically with the lead tag at the end of it. Tim will make sure that John gets all the notes out. But I have just met so many parish leaders in the last couple of months who don't realize that there's a whole resource packet with a lot of nuances for flexibility around it to help parishes do this well together, to build momentum. And so sign up for the newsletter. You can do that yourself too, but you can also sign up groups too to be part of this and to look at some of those pieces around the small faith sharing group, having a parish mission on the Eucharist. Like all of those pieces can come together really nicely for people as well.
I was just looking here at the playbook on the website. I just want to emphasize, it says no two communities have identical gifts, nor will the needs be exactly the same. A one-size-fits-all approach, basically, we realize that doesn't work. So we've created something that's adaptable and applicable, and you can use it and customize it to your own parish needs. So everybody needs to hear that, because we all know that we're all facing unique challenges and situations. So as we close up here, I just want to throw it back to you guys. What's one last thing you want to leave people with? A thought, a quote, a story? Give you one last word, and then we'll wrap things up.
I would just say, that again, it's clear that the world is hurting and the church is hurting too, right? And I really firmly believe that God never leaves his church abandoned. Like I truly think that Aslan is on the move in different ways. And they might be small. They might not be things that, lead to remarkable success in terms of numbers. And, it's 80% of Catholics now believe in the real presence or something. But my conviction is that for those who are willing to open their hearts right now, God is uniquely present in the church to heal, form, convert, and unify. So he's with us would be my feeling.
Just building on that, I would say, I've been reading a lot about Solanus Casey actually at the moment, and one of the great maxims of his life was to give thanks to God ahead of time for what is to come. And, the greatest Thanksgiving is the Eucharist. And so start praying now, start giving thanks now for what's already happening right in the midst of God's people. Because like Tim says, he is moving and he's here. And let's be grateful and open our hearts to the gift of Thanksgiving for our faith, for this time, for the courage of so many who are moving this forward in their parishes and their homes. And I think that spirit of thankfulness is going to pour into Lucas Oil Stadium. And I think it's going to be just an incredibly momentous event for us here in this country.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for giving your lives away for the sake of the kingdom and the church. And I know that there's so many sacrifices you make with family and behind the scenes that nobody ever sees. And thank your families for us, because they make it all possible. So thank you for being here with us. And we look forward to the next year and a half and all that's to come after that. God bless you guys.
Thanks, John.
Take care.
I love Tim and Julianne, and I'm so glad that they are leading this movement. Just great people with great hearts. I do want to continue to offer, if you have any questions that I can answer, I will do my best. But I do want to answer one that came here asking about where are the Beatitudes, Matthew 25, and Catholic social teaching present in this national revival. And I would direct you towards, and Joe, you'll put the link up there again, but on the Eucharistic Revival website, if you'll click the lead button and go down to Year of Parish Revival, there are 4 pillars around the Year of Parish Revival. And this is all in the Leader's Playbook, which I encourage you to download. It's free. They call it 4 invitations or 4 pillars, and they are reinvigorating worship, personal encounter, robust faith formation, and missionary sending. And the missionary sending is not just going out to invite people to re-encounter the Eucharist, but it's a missionary sending that also goes to those in need and those on the margins. Now, I don't know the full extent of how they're building that out or suggesting it, but it is one of the 4 focuses of the Eucharistic Revival. So I encourage you to download that Leader's Playbook and see what they have there. I don't know specifically how they'll be addressing that at the Congress, but I know that it's one of their 4 priorities. So I would imagine it is going to be addressed there. Thank you again for joining us. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. There'll be an email coming to you tomorrow afternoon, probably, with a link to rewatch this webinar or share it with others and links to everything that we discussed. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you soon. God bless.